those experiences, as a child, we view them through child lens. But now that I'm older, I view those same experiences with a different lens. And it's a lens that concerns me quite a bit. Let me tell you why. Because I can say to us, and I say to us that I can imagine how we jump for sports, and we jump for stars, and we jump for people who we think are important. But when we think about all the things God has done for us, somehow or the other, we get real quiet. Hello? When we think about how good God has been, it takes a whole lot to prod and prompt and pull out of us just to simply even, because everybody won't jump and scream, and I don't expect everybody to jump and scream, but at least nod your head and at least contemplate somehow or the other that you are pausing to recognize and to see and to acknowledge that God has been good. And I get concerned when we are very comfortable as a people, ready to celebrate and acknowledge other people, but will not acknowledge the goodness of God. I don't know about you, but I quite like the song, because I really like it, because the song is true. I must sing of the goodness of God, because all my life, God has been, is there anybody can testify? All my life, God has been good, and with every breath that I am able, I gonna sing, I will talk about the goodness of God. I will not keep quiet, I will not keep silent, I will tell somebody every opportunity I get that if nothing else, God has been good to me. And that is basically the message in a nutshell. That church, from time to time, we need to pause to simply celebrate the goodness of God. And that is what Psalm 66 talks about. Psalm 66 is this psalm, is the context of it, is that some battle had been fought. We're not sure, scholars can't tell us which one, but a battle had been fought. And what we know is that the battle had been fought and the victory had been won. And Psalm 66 is a psalm that says, look here, I just need to pause for a moment to make a joyful noise unto God, because God has won my victories for me. Let me say it one more time. I just need to pause after thinking about the victories that God has won, and I now need to pause to celebrate the victories of God in my life. And I do believe, my sisters and brothers, that this is an appropriate psalm for us today, because there has been a lot of emphasis, and I check myself sometimes, there has been a lot of emphasis and a lot of talk about all the things that has been wrong with our society and our community and our world. But with all the things we can name that is wrong, there is still a whole lot of things that we can celebrate that is right. Can I talk for a minute? We can celebrate the rain that fell. Hello? We can celebrate that, boy, while even, yes, COVID numbers are still going up and still that's going on, but we can celebrate the fact that for the first time in 2 years that our children have been able to go to school every day, that our children have been able to have in-person graduation and walk and celebrate and dress up and look nice and have plenty prom clothes, and the parents are now broke, but that's a different story. But we can celebrate that they have had some semblance of life that seems normal. We can, I don't know if you remember the days when you only had 10 people at funerals, but now when you have a death, you can have a regular, what we consider quote unquote, regular funeral and regular function. We might think about those things as minuscule things, but I want to suggest to us this morning that part of the problem that we have from time to time is that we only want to celebrate big victories. But every once in a while, we need to celebrate the small stuff. and celebrate the small victories. Are we talking about emancipation? This is perhaps a symptom of us people of the darker hue. That's part of the reason why we don't have much more money sometimes, Sister Amy, because some other folk go to the bank and deposit $1. We only want to go deposit 500. You don't want to talk about that either. Am I talking sense? Yeah, but I've learned, right? You see, when you have not been an athlete, like me, I have not been an athlete, and you see when you've been struggling with all these extra fluffiness from the time you're 12, you've learned that when you step on the scale last week and you saw 250, whatever it is you saw, I think me foolish, a joke I make. I think me foolish. Whenever you saw that number that you saw, but when you step back on this week and you realize that that number is down by 2 pounds, you need to celebrate the fact that 2 pounds gone. Hello? If you go to the seamstress or to the tailor, and when you measured the last time when they went wrong, so they had to stretch far to get round the whole of you, and when they got there, they saw one number, you go back a month later to pick up the same outfit, and you realize, but what happened to you? Weight, you lose weight, and the number gone from a big number to 2 numbers less. Celebrate the small things. And from time to time, I think we lose the essence of celebration because we only want to celebrate the big things. But every once in a while, we need to celebrate even the small things in our lives. Celebrate the small blessings that God has given. Everybody might not get healed from cancer, but somebody woke up this morning. That's a small, that might be a big thing, but that's a small. Somebody went to bed last night with a headache and got up this morning without the headache. That's something that you can celebrate. We celebrate the things, and the text encourages us that we need to understand that sometimes you just need to stop and celebrate some things. Can I tell us a couple of things? Because we got to go to the Lord's table. So let me tell you a couple of things that the text suggests that how we can celebrate. One of the things the text encourages us to do is to celebrate the silencing of our enemies. Look at the text. I'm in verse 1 through 3 of the text. The psalmist begins with an invitation to make a joyful noise, to make the praise of God, make the noise of God, make our praise glorious. Then the psalmist says, this is what I want you to say. Hear what the psalmist says. The psalmist says, listen here. I need you to stand up now and tell God that your works are glorious. Say to God that you have done some good. You had it right just now, Andrea. Say to God that you are doing some good things. And say to God that the greatness of your power causes the enemies, here, look at the word that is used there, to cringe, to cower. It depends, some translations interpret that word to be silent before you. Now, there are a couple of things we can figure out in the text. Because hear this, the psalmist makes the assertion that God is a God of great power. The psalmist also is aware that there are persons who don't like God. Hello? The psalmist is very much aware. The psalmist was not lost. That as much as God is terrible, or the works of God are wonderful, as much as the power of God is there, that there are still persons who see the works and acknowledge that God is at work, and see the power and acknowledge the power, but they still don't like him. I'm trying, Rena, I'm trying. So he's not lost on the fact. The psalmist is also asserting the fact that the enemies know what God doing. Let's come back to the text. So much so that when they see the things of God, they cringe. They get upset. They dislike the things that's going on. I don't know if you see where I'm going, but you're going to say, everybody going to say amen in about 2 sentences, maybe 3. Give me a couple of minutes. Because Sister Raquel, here is what I want to suggest to us. That we are all children and carrying in some way the marks of God. That God has placed his spirit inside of us. And if God has placed his spirit inside of us, then it means, Miss Helen, that we can acknowledge the fact that God is at work in us. And God is at work through us. And if God is in work and at work through us, and all these things, we can point out that the works of God is wonderful and powerful and all of that. If God had enemies for being God and doing what God had done, what about you? That's the amen point right there. So everybody watch me now, huh? Let me say it one more time. If God did what God could do, and God was mighty and awesome, and God had enemies, if God is at work in you and through you, what about you? I'm trying to tell you a couple of things. You will have enemies. Hello? And let's talk. Let's talk for a moment. I want to spend some moment talking about enemies and dealing with enemies for a moment. Let's talk about this for a moment. You will have some enemies. But hear this. The enemies are not upset at you. The enemies are upset at the God at work in you. I don't know. I want to take my time right through here because I need us to get this. I don't know if you've ever met some people who you don't know, but the people just don't like you. And somehow or the other, no matter what you do, you can't do nothing right for these people. And they make it a point of view to make your life a living hell. And they go, and don't misinterpret what's going on. It's not that they don't like you. They see something in you. And whatever it is they are seeing in you is causing them to cringe so much that they can't attack the thing in you, so they begin to attack you. Can I come, let's come, don't run. And let me talk about this for a moment, because we have to understand, church, that somebody ain't gonna like you for some reason or another. And some people are designed to be your enemies. And be glad for them. I tell people all the time, I'm glad for every Judas I have ever met. Because when I've met them Judases, they let me know, they taught me how to pray, they taught me how to think and how to look at people differently. Be glad for every enemy. But let me tell you this though, be careful that our enemies do not overtake or consume even our prayers. Church, hear me well. Be careful how you begin to pray for your enemies. Because, let me tell you this, and this is not just about enemies. Be careful even how we pray about the devil. Please do not spend your time talking to God about the devil. God knows that the devil wicked. God knows that the devil out of order and think he bright. God knows all of that. So God don't need us to spend any time giving the devil credence by telling the devil or by telling God all what we think the devil is about. No. And it's the same thing with our enemies. Do me a favor. Don't spend time talking to God about your enemies. Spend time talking to your enemies about God. That's a different story. But don't spend time to consume your prayers and spend the amount of time talking about all the things that the enemies do and the enemy and God sees and God knows. Hear how the psalmist dealt with this. Notice even before the psalmist spoke about the enemies, what did the psalmist do? The psalmist stopped for a moment. And even before the psalmist mentioned the enemies, the psalmist started to celebrate God. Wait, let me say it one more time, because you thank you, Miss Helen. Let me say it one more time. Even before the psalmist mentioned the enemies, the psalmist started to celebrate God. Look, go back to verse 1 and verse 2. God, you are a great God. Make a joyful noise. God, sing the honor of your name. Make his praise glorious. Hear what the psalmist says. God, we are going to tell you, I'm going to let you know, even what you don't know, that God, your works are wonderful. That God, your power, you are all powerful. That God, so what the psalmist did is the psalmist started to lift up God. And by the time he started to lift up God, then the perspective of his enemy came true. So much so that, God, if I lift you up, the enemies then will begin to cringe because they can't understand who this God is. And I'm trying to tell somebody this morning that if you just pause for a moment to celebrate God, God will silence your enemies. Lord have mercy. Somebody else needs it. Let me say it on this side. If you pause for a moment to simply celebrate the goodness of God, God will silence your enemies. Let me say it one more time. Sister Denise, if we pause for a moment to just celebrate God, God will silence your enemies. If we pause, let me say it until you get it. If we pause for a moment to simply celebrate God and tell God who he is, we would get so caught up praising God and celebrating the goodness of God and celebrating the might of God and the power of God and the splendor of God that we will have no time to realize that the enemies are trying to attack us, because when we lift God up, God will answer us and begin to silence them. And the weapon that we have that they don't have, the weapon that we have that the weapon that we have that they don't have is that the believers know how to pray. And the believers know what it is to praise God. And the believers understand what the power of prayer and praise can do. The believers know that when we begin to celebrate and to lift up God, that the devil begins to cringe at the very mention of his name. And church, don't worry about your enemies. Don't worry about them who don't like you. Don't worry about all those things, because they cringe at the very name of God. Celebrate God, for God will silence your enemies. Yeah. So here's what the psalmist says. The psalmist says, look, I'm going to celebrate God, because when I celebrate God, my enemies will have to understand themselves. Wait, I want to leave it alone. But God, go down this road one more time, Cara. I really want to leave it alone. But because you see, the issue is that when you know who God is and you begin to celebrate God, the problem that the enemy have is that they can't understand you. Somehow or the other, it might knock you down. It might shake you for a little bit, but you just get up and you dust yourself off. And you come strength to strength, and they can't understand that. But all you have to do is keep the focus. So the psalmist says that, look, we celebrate God because God silence in our celebration. God will silence our enemies. But the psalmist goes on to say, listen, don't spend too much time on them. Don't celebrate God for your enemies. Sometimes and in the celebrating of God for yourself, here's the second thing I want to suggest the text says to us, is that we then need to recount God's blessings. Look, and verse 7, will worship you, and they will sing unto your name. Come, let's see the work. Come, let's see the wonderful, they use terrible here, the wonderful deeds he has done among men. And here where the psalmist takes you back. You have to know, hope you went to Sunday school, because we're going to Sunday school now. Here where the psalmist took you back. The psalmist takes us back to the time when the people of Israel were under Pharaoh. Remember that story there? Pharaoh and the Egyptians. And God sent Moses and said, tell them, let my people go. And when he said, I can't do that. And when they got out, they started to run. And when they were running, they got to the Red Sea. Remember that? And they looked back. And what they looked on one side, they saw the sea. And when they looked in front of them, they saw the Egyptians coming after them. And then all of a sudden, they looked back again. And what did they see this time? That the Red Sea parted. Yes, sir, somebody know what I'm talking about. And it was dry land in front of them. And the people of Israel trotted through the Red Sea on dry land. And the other Egyptians figured that if the God did it for them, that he can do it for them too. That's why I don't like this business. But if God is blessing you, he's on your row. Because that ain't true. God don't bless me and you the same way. And not because God give you some stuff that mean that he gonna give it to me. And so when the Egyptians got to the Red Sea, thinking that the same fate of us, they were left to drown, while the people of Israel were on the other side. Pastor, where you going with this? Every once in a while, we have to celebrate God for the things that God has done. Now, let's push this thought a little further. Have you ever been in a place where your back is where you've done all you can, and everything you have done is failed? Have you ever been to that point, brother and sister Pruitt, where you tried so much stuff and you can't get through it, so all you do then is just throw your hand up in the air and say, well, I just have to cut my losses and, well, whatever happened, happened. You ever been there when you figure, when they said no somewhere, that all of a sudden, what you thought could not happen started to happen? Like the people at the Red Sea, you got there and you saw all the tumultuous multitude all in front of you, and you can't walk on water. Yeah, make up the word, Bev. You can't swim, you can't walk on water, you can't do none of that stuff. So you just make up your mind to drown in the water that there is, but somehow or the other, in that last shower of rain, and every door that was closed somehow or the other became open, and you were able to go through in some things that you know you had no right going through, that it just did not make sense to anybody. It just did not, you yourself can't understand it, nobody can understand it, but all you know is you don't know where the yes came from, you don't know where the thing came from, but all you know is that it came from somewhere. Here's the text. The text tells us where they came from. For the last verse of verse 6, I believe, says that when they got to the other side of the Red Sea, what did the people do? The people stood up. And look in the text. And they celebrated. They rejoiced in what God had done for them. And every once in a while, my sisters and brothers, we have to get to the point where we pause to simply recount the blessings in our lives. We have to pause to recount the many times when we threw our hands up in the air in surrender and we said, well, it's done, I can't get no further, it ain't gonna get no better than this, but God stepped in. Has God ever blown your mind? Has God ever done some things for you now that when you look back you could only say the only reason where I am or have gotten what I've gotten is because God opened doors? Has God ever blown your mind that when everybody else said no, it can't happen, and you've given it all up, God made a way when there seemed to have been, am I talking to anybody this morning? God made a way, and everybody has a story that they can recount the many times when God blessed you. So amid the conflict, whether great or small, do not be disheartened. God is over all. Count your many blessings and comfort give you to your one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. I dropped by to tell somebody this morning, count your blessings. Hello? Count your blessings. Take a moment, rethink the things and all the times, because here's a good part of the story. You might not have been, everybody might not have a Red Sea story. For some people, it might have been a small thing. For other people, it's a big thing. For some people, it might have been all big things. But at some point, you can tell the story how God worked for you. Hello? I don't talk about this part of my life much at all. Let me tell you part of the reason why I just can't keep quiet when I start talking about God. The stream was giving problems. And this is one case where I hope it's not working, but if it is, whatever it is, it is. There was a season in my life, and there was a time in my life's journey when I wanted to kill myself. And I got close. I can tell you how close I got. I got up one morning at 5 o'clock, got into my car, and started driving. And I drove and I called my one sister, and she didn't answer because this was early in the morning. I called my next sister, and she didn't answer. And I called my other sister, and she didn't answer either. And I took that as a sign from God that yes, now the day is over. Night has drawn nigh. I'm supposed to get myself out of this. And I was ready to drive the car over the cliff. And I said, by the time they find me, I'll go done dead. And I'll be out of my misery. Because every once in a while, life kind of things that you think you can deal with. And just sister that I called. And she said, where are you? She said, Remy, where are you? I said, I just drive. And she said, why you sound so? Because somehow you can hide a lot of things from a lot of people. But you see the people that really know you, from the time you say hello. Am I talking to anybody? from the time she said hello, she said, Remy, what's wrong with you? I wouldn't tell her nothing. And I said, girl, if you didn't answer this phone now, I'm going to tell you where I am. And when she knew the island where I was, she knew the topography. And when I told her where I was and what I was telling her to do, she sat on that phone for 3 hours. This is the British Caribbean now, eh? And she called from here in the Virgin Islands. I said, you know what she phoned me look like when the month come? And she spoke to me for 3 hours. And had she not done that, I would have been a dead man. Because I thought that whatever it was too much for me to bear. But I can look back on that now. Oh, bless the name of God. And I can tell you that God answers, and I could recount the many blessings since that day until now. If I started to tell you how God would have blessed me since that day till now, one of them in this church here, because since that day till now, I met that young woman behind there. You see how she pretty and she look nice? Lord have mercy. That's one of the blessings that I am forever grateful to God for, because let me tell you,